Hello, everyone. This is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. Today we are going to be talking about CNN and just some of the remarkable scandals they've had over the past year in regard to Chris Cuomo, who was fired, the brother of Andrew Cuomo, who's the former governor of New York, who of course resigned in disgrace after he got caught for sexual assault. But I don't think that's the real reason why he went down. I think the real reason he went down is because of the nursing home scandals and him not disclosing correct information when it came to people who were dying in nursing homes because of his COVID policies. And there were other governors who made similar policies. For example, my governor here in Michigan, and I think as a way to take off some of that heat, they decided to go toward another sort of scandal. And he was mean anyway. He berated people. He did not have a lot of friends. So that was a time for the Cuomo to fall, and he fell. And of course, his brother was helping him along the way, advising him on how to deal with some of his accusers and how to handle the press. And of course, he was also like having him on the show for a long while. So they had an inappropriate, unethical sort of relationship while they were at least filming things on CNN. And he just went, as a brother, people say they can understand, but he went way outside his purview. And he also talked about attacking, people trying to discredit people. For example, Janice Dean, whose parents, she had a relative who died in the nursing home, and was really going after Cuomo for it. And he was trying to figure out how they could discredit her and make her look like a crazy right winger. I guess so people wouldn't pay any mind to what she was saying and raising the alarm as far as the nursing home scandal. We're also going to be talking about two producers who were, one was fired for sex trafficking after those alleged allegations came out, and another one actually ended up resigning after he some graphic kind of stuff came out as far as him going after like minors and whatnot. So we're going to be talking about that. And also Mr. Jeffrey Toobin, who is their legal analyst. You may recall that he was the one who got caught on a Zoom call diddling himself when he was talking to his colleagues at the, I believe it was a New Yorker, and CNN let him go for a little while, but they did bring him back on. And so he has quite a checkered past, we'll say, with women. Like when he was with his, he cheated on his wife with a mistress and knocked her up and wanted her to have, allegedly, I guess we'll say, to have an abortion and wanted to pay for it. And then after she wouldn't, he didn't want to pay for child support. And of course, he got caught in his own sort of net with that, and had to end up, relenting. But it's really interesting. Men like him, and he got blazed on the internet when he was talking about Roe v. Wade and how it might be, I guess, up in danger after the current cases that they had, the ban, well, the challenges at I believe it's 15 weeks. And so that's going right up against Roe v. Wade. So they heard the arguments late last year. And so he made a comment about that. And people were like, hold up a second, you scumbag. You're exactly the type of person who would want something like this, since you wanted your mistress, who was the daughter of a colleague, to have an abortion, and tried to kind of make her get one, and was mad when she wouldn't get one. And then you didn't want to pay the child support, even though he's obviously a legal analyst at CNN, and has a good career. There's no reason why he shouldn't be able to take care of a child, other than he's just a scumbag. So I wanted to talk about that, and you may be curious as to why today of all days. We know it's January 6th, and it's like, Well, I saw that they were streaming live from the Capitol, and they're making a big spectacle out of all, what happened last year. And so I'm like, you know what, I want to talk about this today. And we can talk about some of the bad takes from the media surrounding this day tomorrow. But today I wanted to talk about this. I said I would, and so that's what we're going to do. Thank you guys for checking in. Thank you guys for watching. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content that I have on my website. I have different articles on there. If you like what I do, please consider going to blacktnews.com/donate, leaving a donation. Any little thing help, whether it's $20, $50, $100, whatever you would like to do. I greatly appreciate it. You're helping to grow Black Teen News, and we certainly did have a lot of expansion last year. I like to thank Brighter Michigan PAC I'm in their studio today. So I appreciate them, and I appreciate the opportunity to be in here. As always, if you don't like what I have to say, there's no one to complain to. You're just gonna have to change, flip it somewhere else, go to a different screen, exit out, keep scrolling, whatnot. There's no one to complain to. Don't complain to them. They can't fire me. It doesn't work like that. I'm just using the space, and they're just allowing a conservative voice to speak on matters, but that's what it is. So there's no one to cry to. You're gonna have to cry in your own pillow because no one else wants to hear about it. But I do thank them for the opportunity, for the space. I do love being in the studio. You can also check out different merch that we have on blacktnews.com, like the goat hoodie. We do also have those in different colors. Also have those in different shirts. The Denounce White Supremacy, Defeat Joe Biden shirt with a list of his racist atrocities on the back, so you can trigger a leftist in your life today. And also have the I Am Not the Victim You Are Looking For shirts, and also got other sort of stuff, as well as I also write nonfiction and fiction books. So if you want to find any of that stuff, you can go to blacktnews.com and check out different content that I have. So let's just jump into it. So first, right off the bat, I want to talk about Mr. Andrew Cuomo and his brother, Chris Cuomo. Chris Cuomo, of course, worked at CNN and was one of their lead anchors, and he was recently let go because he was entangled in uh, an inappropriate, unethical relationship with his brother. They have him on during the time of the COVID, because at the time the media decided at first, when everything started to break out. I was kind of optimistic. I'm like, oh, Trump's, they're getting the ventilators, they're getting the private sector help with that, and to get the mask together. They're making this task force. They're keeping the governors informed. And at first, governors were like, even Cuomo and even Newsom, like the press would ask, like, how's it going? How's it going? And like, we know you want us to bash Trump, but they're actually doing a good job. They're giving us what we need. Pence is like keeping us up to date, and so, but eventually there was a turn. You could feel the media trying to make a turn, and then the Democrats, I guess, decided there needed to be some kind of turn. So Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, was their hero. You had people saying that they're Cuomo sexuals, which is like super creepy now, given why he had to resign. But he was the leadership, even though New York had high cases, even though they had deaths, and they had the nursing home scandal that had been going on for a while, but they decided to tamper that. Now, people on the right were talking about that for a while, including Janice Dean, who lost loved ones because of the nursing home situation. Like, they wanted to put COVID patients, entangle them, I guess, in the nursing homes, and so that it was greatly misrepresented the numbers. Like, if you got sick, if you had an elderly person who was sick, and they sent you to the hospital, and then you died at the hospital, you didn't die in the nursing home. So they had a way of really kind of undercut counting the numbers, which they did so purposely, and that started to come out eventually. But right people on the right were talking about it very early on, and then it was like, I don't know, maybe even like a full year later, almost, like months down the line, when the mainstream media started to open up to this reality for whatever reason. Now, maybe it's because you had Latita, who was the AG, and they started to look into that stuff. And she was an ambitious person. She did announce that she was running for a hot second, but I think she pulled back on that. Maybe somebody called and reached out to her, cut some kind of deal, but she was blood in the water. Saw a opportune moment for her to be in charge, and it, I guess, is not panning out in that way. But they did take down Cuomo. People who question Cuomo, he would be very rude, very mean, berate people, threaten people. So he lost friends, and so I guess people saw an opportunity to take him down. So eventually, this information started to get out. Now the problem um, was that there are other states and there are other governors who did similar things. So the thinking was, at least in the realm of the commentators, as people talked more about Cuomo and what he did, that it would start coming to light. And so in Michigan, where I live, my governor did a similar thing. Like, they were paying like extra money for beds in nursing homes to send people there for whatever reason. Now we've known from the beginning of the pandemic that the most vulnerable are the elderly. Like, if you're, I mean, you're getting to like, if you're like 30 and under, it's like, could be like, with COVID. But once you start hitting like 65 and up, that's where, and 65 is not, like, in my opinion, elderly, like, it's just like my parents' age and stuff. I mean, they're older than me, but obviously, but that doesn't seem too old. The older you get, these numbers, but that's when the increases of something dramatic happening from COVID start going up. And so they know that if you're like in your 70s, 80s, and so on, then you're in far more danger than like a teenager or a young adult or something like that. So why would they do anything, risk any sort of COVID positive patients being treated with people in nursing homes? It didn't make any sense, and they did that in California, and they did that in other places, all blue governors. It never made any sort of sense to me. And even like, my dad was sick with COVID in November. The day after the election, he went to the hospital, and when he was trying to recover, they wanted him to recover, and they were pushing really, really hard to send him to a nursing home, and we didn't understand why. And they were like, "Well, it's gonna be too tough. It's gonna be too hard." And we're like, "We give us our dad back." And at one point, they even kind of alleged, like, "Well, it's gonna look like you're refusing care," as if our insurance was in danger of that not paying for it. At that point, we're just like, "Give us our dad back." So if we did get our dad back, and we got him back to health, and actually, within by the time May hit, he was on the mission field in Mexico, because he was determined to go on, moving on for the Lord and stuff. Like, but it was really bizarre how they were really pushing people to get to nursing homes. It was really weird, and I don't understand. I'll never understand the thinking behind that, because obviously this is the most vulnerable population. And there was one story in Michigan where there was a kid who was sent to a nursing home because they had COVID or was being treated, and he's recovering, whatever. He had like mental problems, and he shared a room with an elderly man, and he beat on him, and he beat on this man so savagely. And the man ended up, after that attack, he just wasn't the same and kind of withered away. And his dad, the young man's dad, was like, he should have never been in there. That was a huge mistake. Why would, like, he didn't get it? Because not only this is a young man, you mixing him in a room in a nursing home, but he also had like mental problems too. So Cuomo had a lot of trouble ahead of him, just a lot of issues with the nursing home scandal. But there was only so much that they could do, and so they had to turn the attention towards something else. And that's where the sexual assault stuff started to come in. Now, I'm glad he's gone either way. I'm I'm glad he's gone either way, but it seems pretty obvious that that's why they decided to let him go. And so let's just cut back to memory lane a little bit of Cuomo their little duo, their little love fest.
Obviously, I love you as a brother. Obviously, I'll never be objective. Obviously, I think you're the best politician in the country.
You've always been good at manipulation. You've always been the meatball of the family.
I've seen you referred to a little bit recently as the love gov, and I'm wondering if that's bleeding into your demeanor at all, making you a little soft on the president.
I called Mom just before I came on this show.
It's not what
By
she
the
said.
way, she said I was her favorite.
She never said
Good
that.
news is she said you were her second favorite.
I know you like to run around with your ill-fitting jacket.
Your appearance suggests you didn't have the best day. Your buttons are undone. Your shirt is a little tattered and wrinkled. How are you doing? How's it going over there? Wasn't a great day, huh?
First of all, that's a cheap shot.
I've always been a soft guy. I am the love gov. I'm a cool dude in a loose mood. You know that. I just say, let it go. Just go with the flow, baby.
Not everybody likes you. Not everybody likes me.
Ask me a tough question. Come on, ask me a tough question.
I have a few. Is it true that this was the swab that the nurse was actually using on you, and that at first it went into your nose and disappeared, so that in scale, this was the actual swab that was being used to fit up that double-barrel shotgun that you have mounted on the front of your pretty face?
You violated the curfew all the time, caused much pain, but that's a different story.
I don't believe in rules.
That's a legitimate issue. I knew you would get to one sooner or later.
God forbid you have money to buy gas or something like that whenever we're out on the boat. I know. You don't get any money. It doesn't go to you personally.
God forbid.
I get it.
You're the one who sews his pockets closed. And you want to talk about me?
Of course, I won't always be able to keep having you on the show. It'll never be seen as fair in people's eyes, and we both get that, and that's okay.
But you're a great interviewer, by the way.
Appreciate it. Learn from the best.
I love you.
But not that nose.
I know
Let
you
me
love
ask
me
you
deep
something
down
else.
inside.
No, I love you all the way on the outside.
I think we saved tens of thousands of lives, but I did what was right. And you do what is right. You tell the truth. You get up every night and you tell the truth, whether they like it or not. This is the truth the way you see it.
He's my big brother. I love him. Of course, I'm not objective.
Yeah, obviously not objective, and people understand that because you're family, but it was not appropriate for them to continuously interview him like that. And it's a little comedy bit, and people understand that they're brothers. But the media had this goal of building up Andrew Cuomo because he was like the leadership everyone wanted to hold up, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they thought he would even run to do a presidential run at some point. I don't know, but he was their guy. And then in contrast to President Trump, who they wanted to be this chaotic sort of leader who they just thought was like ruining America. So much to the point where Cuomo, he received an Emmy for his like meetings or talks or whatever he'd do. And he also wrote this book about leadership. Now he actually had to has to use like his profits from that book to like pay back to the city and fines and stuff like that. So that's a little bit of justice there. But the audacity to put something like this out, knowing what he'd done with the nursing home scandal, was just absolutely atrocious, absolutely sick. So let's just remember a little bit of that coverage when people started really talking about it. Again, the media was really late. The mainstream media was pretty late on the ball as far as the nursing home scandal. But when it really started to come out, and they started to do reports on how they had undercounted, it was pretty big deal.
Let's turn in the time we have left to another politician who had a very bad week, and that is New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. It first came out that the state of New York had severely undercounted the number of people living in nursing homes who had died from COVID-19, and last month Governor Cuomo said this about that. Take a look.
We're below the national average in number of deaths in nursing homes. But who cares? 33, 28, died in a hospital, died in a nursing home. They died.
Now, one of Cuomo's top aides was quoted this week as having said that the Cuomo administration froze on, her word, froze on releasing the numbers when the Justice Department asked for them because they were concerned that the Trump administration was going to use those figures against them. Mark, how damaging for Andrew Cuomo?
Well, just think of it this way. Imagine if Donald Trump had done what Andrew Cuomo did and falsified data on the pandemic for political purposes. We'd have a third impeachment going. So, but the other thing is that I think people are missing the real scandal here. So everybody's focused on the fact that he did not give data that was supposed to go to the Justice Department on August 23rd, investigating the deaths. The real scandal is that for months before that, starting in May, he was providing false data to public health officials. So public health, the virus that spread across the country was not the variant on the West Coast. It was the Italian variant that started in New York, and that seeded the entire pandemic across the country. Public health officials were desperately trying to figure out how this virus was spreading, who was most vulnerable, how they could stop it. And Cuomo fed them false data about who was getting sick and where.
I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad he's resigned. I'm glad they took him out the way, whatever. But I think was to spare Cuomo from the accountability with this, because that was pretty bad. I mean, not only did people die, they were trying to figure out how to stop other people from dying, and he's out there falsifying information as people are trying to figure out how to go on and fix this pandemic, if it's fixable at all. But giving false information definitely doesn't help, especially to cover your butt after your poor, inexcusable decisions. It like I said, didn't make any sense. So as things started heating up with him, it started heating up. Eyes were on other people like Gretchen Whitmer. I mean, eyes were on Gavin Newsom, but people hated him anyway. He won he survived his recall though. But I think Whitmer was like a big target here in Michigan, that people started to target him and people really started to look at her. Stephen Crowder even came to like the Capitol and had a big rally about how the deaths are undercounted. We don't actually know the real numbers. So they started turning the tide, and you started hearing stories about sexual assault allegations, and there's plenty of stuff that it was like legit. So I'm glad that they got him, but here's the AG that day that she gave the report.
These interviews and pieces of evidence reveal a deeply disturbing yet clear picture. Governor Cuomo sexually harassed current and former state employees in violation of both federal and state laws. The independent investigation found that Governor Cuomo sexually harassed multiple women, many of whom were young women, by engaging in unwanted groping, kisses, hugging, and by making inappropriate comments. Further, the governor and his senior team took actions to retaliate against at least one former employee for coming forward with her story, her truth. And Governor Cuomo's administration fostered a toxic workplace that enabled harassment and created a hostile work environment where staffers did not feel comfortable coming forward with complaints about sexual harassment due to a climate of fear and given the power dynamics. The investigators found that Governor Cuomo's actions and those of the executive chamber violated multiple state and federal laws, as well as the executive chamber's own written policies. This investigation has revealed conduct that corrodes the very fabric and character of our state government and shines light on injustice that can be present at the highest levels of government.
So Chris Cuomo, he was advising his brother, and again, it's his brother, but they did have this. He shouldn't have been interviewing him like he was doing their little brother bit, but it turned out he was going more in advisement and doing more than I guess CNN claims that they knew that he was involved in. And it wasn't only with the sexual assault stuff. Like there was emails that or text messages that revealed that he was in contact with his brother's staff, trying to figure out, for example, how to smear Janice Dean, who's he called her the Fox Weather bleep. because she had lost her in-laws during the pandemic because of the nursing home situation. So she had been on Andrew Cuomo for a long time, really sounding the alarm. And so Chris was trying to figure out how to discredit her. And he was using his sources to kind of figure out stuff about the other women who alleged things. And the firing of the resignation of his brother, the firing of Chris couldn't happen to nicer people, I tell you. So CNN, they publicly felt like they were not, Chris wasn't honest about how involved he was with his brother, so they decided to let him go. But he was in a contract with CNN, a multiple year contract. So he is actually, last I heard him cover on the show, he was looking into suing CNN to get some of that money that he believes that he is owed. CNN has more, I guess, morality clauses and stuff in their contract, so I guess they would argue that they're not going to pay that out. And they're also sort of going into like mergers and different stuff with other companies. So maybe that has something to do with some people's contracts also deciding to get rid of Chris as well. But it will be interesting to see where he goes with them. But Daily Wire reported Cuomo has hired lawyers and is preparing to file a lawsuit over the remainder of the 4-year contract he signed last year after a bitter back and forth about what the network knew of his secret efforts to aid embattled brother. Then Governor Andrew Cuomo, the New York Post reported his contract was reportedly worth $6 million annually, leaving between 18 million and 20 million that he would be owed, sources said, adding that Chris Cuomo would also likely seek damages. So we'll see what happens between them. I think it's great when they eat each other, but obviously CNN should have known that this wasn't ethical the way that they were engaging, but they didn't care because they thought it was funny, they thought it was cute, you know, the two liberal brothers, the governor, the journalist going back and forth, and they wanted to uplift Andrew Cuomo. Everybody on the left were basically doing, like I said, they had Cuomo sexuals. People were saying that. People were talking about how much they loved him. People were talking about how attractive he was, and that they loved him, and he was true leadership, and Trump was the awful clown who they wanted out of office. So they hitched their stars to really defective rides, and and that's only the tip of it. That's only the tip of it. So let's talk about Mr. Toobin. If you guys don't know who Mr. Toobin is, Jeffrey Toobin, which I don't know how you don't know the story. So last year there was a CNN legal analyst, who got in trouble because he was on a Zoom call with some colleagues and he was doing some nasty stuff. He was doing some nasty stuff to himself. People have at least said he wasn't sexually assaulting anyone else. He was doing it to himself. It's still inappropriate because why would you do that on a Zoom call while you're with your colleagues? And so I guess, accidentally he wasn't aware that it was back on him or whatever. And people saw things. So he was let go of CNN for a little bit. He was on a suspension. And then they eventually brought him back. Mr. Toobin. That's that. If you didn't know who he was, and that's what he looks like, Mr. Toobin. I know many of you probably don't bother watching CNN too often. A lot of people don't. Their ratings are very bad. But Mr. Toobin has a pretty interesting history with women. That's pretty strange, to say the least. Let me play a little bit of when he actually finally started to come back, because this other article I want to get to is a little bit later in time.
I'm sure you've replayed that embarrassing moment over and over many times. Have you ever thought about what it must have been like to be on the receiving end of that Zoom call?
Well, I haven't just thought about it. I've spoken to several of my former colleagues at The New Yorker about it. And, they were shocked and appalled. I think they realized that this was not intended for them. I think they realized that this was something that I would immediately regret, as I certainly did. And it was that day that I began apologizing, and that is something that I have tried to continue to do, both publicly and privately. You know, we've covered a lot of political scandals, and we've heard what I like to think of as the politician apology, which is, you know, I'm sorry if you were offended, which always sounds to me like I've said the words, now get off my back. That's exactly what I've tried not to do. I mean, I have tried, and I'm trying now, to say how sorry I am. Sincerely, in all seriousness. Above all, I am sorry to my wife and to my family, but I'm also sorry to the people on the Zoom call. I'm sorry to my former colleagues at The New Yorker. I'm sorry to my current, fortunately still colleagues at CNN. And I'm sorry to the people who read my work and who watched me on CNN and who thought I was a better person than this. And so, you know, I got a lot to rebuild, but I feel very privileged and very lucky that I'm going to be able to try to do that.
Here's a question. How do you just go back to work after that on the news? How do you just go back to life after something like that strange, weird, and gross happening? Did you get a thrill out of maybe being caught? Like, why not just like wait after the meeting? There's something really sick about it. But not too long ago, people were clowning on Toobin, and he was dragged on social media because he was giving commentary, and he's a legal analyst. That's what they pay him to do, about Roe v. Wade and the cases that have become before the Supreme Court. So people were just acknowledging his checkered history and why someone like him would want Roe v. Wade intact. This is from Daily Mail that I'm reading. CNN star Jeffrey Toobin. Gonna put up his picture. It's kind of awkward when I read and you guys are looking at me. CNN Jeffrey Toobin was dragged on social media after retweeting that the Supreme Court move to potentially overhauling Roe v. Wade was a wall-to-wall disaster, as critics slam the disgraced legal analyst over his previous scandals. If you believe that women should have the right to choose abortion, today's Supreme Court argument was a wall-to-wall disaster, Toobin tweeted Wednesday amid opening arguments on a Mississippi law that would ban abortion after 15 weeks and a separate request from the state to overturn Roe v. Wade altogether. Twitter users were quick to call out Toobin over his 8-month suspension from the network after he was caught masturbating on a Zoom call with colleagues at the New Yorker magazine, where he also previously worked. Toobin, who admitted to the lewd act when he was welcomed back to CNN in June, also came under fire for reportedly pressuring his mistress, Casey Greenfield, to have an abortion and offering to fund it in 2008 while he was married to Amy Bennett McIntosh. Stephen L. Miller, writer for the right-leaning news outlet The Spectator, posted this sardonic tweet. CNN has Toobin on discussing SCOTUS Mississippi abortion arguments, which, if you know anything about him, is just perfection. Sean Davis, the co-founder of conservative news site The Federalist, was more blunt in his criticism and tweeted, "If you're a dirtbag Zoom call masturbator who knocked up his colleague's daughter and tried to force her to abort his child and then refused to pay child support when she declined to kill his baby, you're probably livid at the notion of taking responsibility instead of murdering it." And Molly Hemingway, a senior contributor for The Federalist, shared a similar post in which she wrote, "Reminder, pro-abortion activist Toobin reportedly once tried to pressure the woman he was cheating on with, the daughter of a colleague, to abort their child, all years before he was caught masturbating at work." Greenfield is the daughter of Toobin's colleague, CNN political analyst Jeff Greenfield. The CNN star allegedly tried to persuade her to have an abortion in 2008 and then initially refused to pay child support after she carried the baby to term. So that's a little bit about creepy Mr. Toobin, who was Toobin himself on a Zoom call with co-workers. And I understand that didn't intend to get caught, but I don't know, maybe it's like sometimes you see on TV or whatever, you like sometimes on there's like a couple or something that want a thrill, so they do it in places in case they get caught. Like they don't want to get caught, but the thrill of maybe getting caught is that what that was about? Because it just doesn't make any sense, and you're just throwing all sort of professionalism out of the window. That doesn't mean that he's a bad legal analyst. I mean, if he was a good one, I assume he wouldn't be on CNN. But and I've seen him have bad takes, and but him also speaking on this particular issue, knowing his past, that was a bad move from CNN as well. Really bad move. So there's, besides Toobin, which a paternity test did prove that Toobin was the father of the baby, and a judge did order that he had to pay child support, which he only agreed to after Greenfield's lawyer threatened to expose the affair to his employers. So, God bless his wife, I guess, for sticking through it, I guess. But there's also other weird things going on CNN that are much more heinous than the things that I have mentioned. Toobin, it's gross, and he's been mocked viciously. But they actually had a producer who was a sex trafficker, and one who was looking into little girls. So those are the more criminal things that people are looking at. One was fired after it came out, and another resigned.
We're sad to tell you something very strange. We're sad to tell you something very strange going on at CNN right now. In just the past week or two separate CNN producers have been accused of child molestation. One of them was a man called John Griffin. He was just indicted by a federal grand jury for attempting to, quote, induce minors to engage in unlawful sexual activity. We're not going to get into details. They're horrifying. He's been fired. Griffin used to work for Chris Cuomo. He bragged about working shoulder to shoulder with him. We'll leave it there. Then just days after that story, Project Veritas exposed another creep at CNN. They published graphic text messages and a video of a CNN producer, apparently CNN producer, fantasizing about molesting a child. Project Veritas said the producer also allegedly sought explicit photographs of that child. So we called over to CNN to ask, is this one of your employees? We have the name. We're not going to air it because none of this has gone to trial. But does he still work there? They didn't get back to us. But this seems like a real story. So to put it into context, as of today, there are more accused pedophiles at CNN than Americans who have died of the so-called Omicron variant that's supposed to be so deadly. Now, that seems like news to us. You'd think CNN would be covering it. Like, what the hell? How many companies can say that? But that's not what they're covering. If you were watching the Unix show over the weekend, you learned that it's actually Fox News that suffered a week of, quote, embarrassing headlines. Paging Dr. Freud. We point up lots of examples of transference. That's when you take the sins you've committed and accuse others of them. Nothing better than this example. Ever.
Yeah, so the first, I guess, pedo we'll talk about, this man here, the ones who aren't the Cuomos and Toobin there, right under the sex scandals. He was a CNN producer, and he worked on New Day with Chris Cuomo. So that's a young Chris Cuomo and Billy Bush, and this producer's father. And here's a picture of Chris with John Griffin. So John Griffin, this is actually from CNN, so they did report on it. Not probably live too much on TV, but they do cover more things on the website. Connecticut man John Griffin was arrested Friday and charged with 3 counts of using a facility to interstate commerce to attempt to entice minors to engage in unlawful sexual activity. The United States Attorney Attorney's Office for the District of Vermont said in a news release. Griffin, 44, has been a producer with CNN for about 8 years. The charges against Mr. Griffin are deeply disturbing, a spokesperson from the network said in a statement Saturday. We only learned of his arrest yesterday afternoon and have suspended him pending investigation. The charges stem from conversations between Griffin and the purported parents of minor daughters in which he allegedly tried to persuade them to allow him to train their daughters to be sexually submissive, as well as an incident in which prosecutors allege unlawful sexual activity occurred with a 9-year-old, the news release said. Ooh. According to an indictment filed on Thursday, Griffin allegedly paid for and kept an online profile for BDSM dating, fetish, and kink site for several years leading up to July 2020, on which he allegedly wrote he was looking for women who were sexually submissive and open-minded. So this is really gross. Obviously really gross. Obviously really disgusting. But they're still doing the investigation, but that they'd even get the women would be involved in this and put they indicted a woman earlier, much earlier than they did him. So a whistleblower at the FBI blasted them for not getting some kind of warrant earlier. And so this is a Fox News report. FBI whistleblower blasts delay for longtime CNN producer John Griffin's child trafficking arrest. It's a 17-month delay between a search warrant that secured longtime CNN producer John Griffin's devices in Vermont and an arrest on child trafficking charges shows that the feds don't give a bleep about these kinds of cases, according to a former FBI agent turned whistleblower who has taken the Bureau to task for years. He obviously is a sexual predator and has gone from grooming children into actually capturing them, said Jane Turner, a former FBI specialist agent who blew the whistle on FBI's mishandling of sex traffic crimes in cases of North Dakota's Native American reservations. Very, very dangerous offender. The evidence against Griffin allegedly includes drone video he took showing a completely naked 9-year-old girl standing next to him in his underwear, according to court filings. When confronted with this video during an interview by FBI agents, Griffin's first response was merely to suggest he was not looking at the naked girl, despite that she was standing so close to him to be touching, the prosecutor's pretrial detention memo reads. Turner has long been critical of the FBI's handling of child trafficking cases. So what's really strange to me, it also mentions in this article that the mother of the 9-year-old, and I guess it's according to this article's adopted daughter, was arrested much earlier. He said he allegedly paid the women more than $3,000 to fly to his multi-million-dollar Vermont vacation home for a week of sex crimes that involved her 9-year-old adopted daughter. I can't think of any legitimate reason for the delay in arresting Griffin, especially when the adoptive mother was arrested August of 2020. So if the adoptive mother who flew her out was arrested August in 2020, then why are we just now hearing about this stuff now? August of 2020? That's before the election. So they arrested her, but he was they didn't get the warrant, they didn't do all that stuff for him. He was still working at CNN all this time. The sex trafficker, even though the mother of the adopted child, they looked into her and got her in August 2020. That is weird. That is weird. Inexcusable, my opinion. That is very strange. And so he's not the only producer. One of Jake Tapper's producers is also embroiled in a scandal as well.
Sir, I'm done having my mouth on her. So
Project Veritas exposed another creep at CNN.
Yet another producer, Rick Salibi, at CNN, we've exposed.
The nature of this audio, the nature of what you're listening to here, is some of the sickest stuff I've ever heard.
His name is Rick Salibi. I'm going to say that again. Rick Salibi.
This is proving that CNN could care less about who they employ over at that sinking ship of a network.
He was fantasizing about a 14-year-old girl, and he was asking for pictures of her 15-year-old daughter and saying things I can't speak into the microphone.
That was her daughter?
Yeah.
So there's actually two that he's talking about. One is her daughter and one is somebody else's.
So he thinks because you sent me money, you're going to get a nude photo of me and my daughter. Are you insane?
He's asked for nude pictures of your 15-year-old daughter?
Yep, mom and daughter pics. He always says mom and daughter pics.
This is disgusting.
It's disgusting.
He's fired, right?
So we called over to CNN to ask, is this one of your employees? Does he still work there? They didn't get back to us.
Jake Tapper, what say you? What is the status of your employee? Last time you secretly fired Steve Brusk. That was another guy we exposed.
Oh, I know.
But this time we have FaceTime calls. Rick Salibi's fiance, the mother of this underage girl, actually sent us a beautiful, heartwarming thank you message after we exposed what Rick Salibi was saying and doing. This is about potential pedophilia, potential abuse against an underage girl. The other question is, what is the status of CNN producer Rick Salibi? Does Rick Salibi still work for Jake Tapper in light of these findings, in light of these text messages, in light of these requests to see pictures of underage girls?
He had chance after chance after chance to do it, to denounce QAnon, and he simply did not do it.
That was the president saying nothing on Friday. He said and tweeted nothing about Stormy Daniels over the weekend, not Sunday night when the interview aired, not since it's as if he didn't even see it.
That's what makes me mad, is that these people with power seem to get away with things.
So, so Project Veritas is the ones who exposed them, and they are going through the court system. They are looking into them, which I saw a video of Project Veritas addressing them as they were coming out the courthouse, but of course they didn't answer anything. But to answer the question, is he fired? He ended up resigning. He ended up resigning from CNN as all this stuff started to break. So he wasn't fired, but he did resign. So he's no longer there. He didn't only work at CNN. He that was his recent gig, but he also done work on other news networks, including Fox. But he obviously, it's gross. I did watch the video that Project Veritas put out with the fiance woman who said that he wanted pics of mother-daughter pics. If he sent money or whatever, then she have to send stuff. So I don't know how deep of their relationship was, and but she said that she wanted to make sure at some point to get him saying stuff so he could I guess have a case against him, and she just wanted to make sure that there was, I guess, someone else involved that she wanted to make sure that she could protect from him. And so she did reach out to Project Veritas, and I did read that letter thanking, once they knew that she was safe and other people were safe, that they went ahead and exposed the name, because at first people were just saying another CNN producer was involved in something, but then Project Veritas decided to release his name. So we know his name and the sort of heinous things that they did, but CNN has had some not good press as of late, and I don't think Jake Tapper, from what I've seen, I haven't seen them really address it as of yet. Now, I did see a CNN article about the other man, but that's an article. Obviously, they do have people on the news talking about things 24/7, but I understand why would they draw unnecessary attention to it, because that's heat on them. But you are a news network, and it's really bad. It's really, really bad. But the story about the other producer with the sex trafficking, knowing that they looked into the mother who participated and they had her in August of 2020, and they still had like a 17-month delay. That is weird. That is weird. Now, obviously, he's a man of means. I've seen his house. I've seen his house. They were bringing him to these big mansions. So I don't know how deep his influence goes. Again, that's a young Chris Cuomo with his dad right there. And so I don't know how long their connections are to each other. And I don't know how much people really know on the inside. Some of the stuff my mom was complaining about, Ghislaine Maxwell, because she got indicted for the sex trafficking, but there's all these people who are obviously their clients out there who have interacted with her and Epstein through all these years. Are they going to get what's coming to them too, or are they just going to go after the madam and all these other people are in the clear, knowing that there's so many high profile pedos out there in the world? And CNN and other news networks were so obsessed with QAnon. And QAnon, they believe some wacky things. Some wacky things. But the thing that they talked about the most, that they seemed the most offended, impressed about, was the allegation that there's a bunch of like deep state pedophiles like running the world. And so one day a reporter, I don't remember what network they're from, they asked Trump, like, well, QAnon, they believe that there's all these high profile pedophiles and that you're supposed to save us from them. And Trump is like, I didn't hear that, but he's just like, it sounds like a good thing. Like, that sounds like it's a good thing, right? Like, I'm like, how dare he not denounce him? How dare he pretend like he doesn't know what's going on? Unless you like know someone in that stuff, which I kind of know someone through like secondhand sort of stuff to know some of the weird stuff they believe. I don't know how deep in he would be into investigating some of the weird stuff anyway. But you're saying that they believe that he's going to save the world from these deep state pedophiles. That does sound like a good thing. But to me, it was how come they weren't mentioning so much of the other stuff, the weird stuff the other stuff they believe, but they were so offended about the allegations that there's all these high profile pedophiles. Why was that the thing that really got to them? It just bothered me. And then when the movies like Cuties came out on Netflix, if you didn't see the trailer for that, just don't do it. Do yourself a favor. But it was about it was more complicated than this, but it was a young girl who basically joined a twerking competition with these three other girls. And like the plot's deeper than that, but people were really upset about the imagery, the fact that it was a young girl actually doing these things. It was like some of the other actresses were a little older, but the main actress was quite young. And so the outrage surrounding that movie, the media painted it as a QAnon conspiracy. So if you had a problem with these little girls in a twerking competition and Netflix like filming them doing these long processes with all these kids to find the right one, I don't know how many kids that they had to watch twerk to select the right ones for this job. But seeing some of this, I didn't watch it. I saw enough clips to be grossed out. But to think that if you were just outraged like that, like a normal person, that you're some kind of QAnon conspiracy theorist. And then there are people on the left that are like, no, that's not true. Like, I don't like this. This is obviously too much. It's obviously weird. And so they started shifting a little bit from that, but it was so weird that if you have a problem with this child in like hot pants and twerk, I mean, there's a scene when she like takes down her stuff and her panties and takes a picture of her vagina and sends it to somebody. I mean, there's some really dark sexual stuff in that film, and if you have a problem with that, you're a QAnon person. Like, that was what the media was trying to paint. It was so bizarre. It was so bizarre. But there's a lot of sickness in this world. A lot of sickness in this world. And I don't know how deep it goes. I don't know how much we'll find out. And I don't know how much we could stomach to find out, but people who hurt kids, they need to have the book thrown at them. So this CNN producer, both of them, but particularly the sex trafficker who they had a 17-month delay in arresting. I guess the FBI is too busy locking up January 6 people, hunting them down. There was one person they hunted down, and it was the wrong person. They like went out to, I think they were from Alaska, and they like went to their house and stuff, and it's just like they couldn't tell who they were with the mask. It was so bizarre. It was so bizarre. And I think, or maybe it was because they were on a plane with the coat. They had a mask on with the, and I think maybe they took it off at some point, and they just couldn't identify them properly. But it just wasn't the right person. And they chase all kinds of things. But to think that there could be a 17-month delay on something like this when they already arrested someone else involved is just, it doesn't sit. It shouldn't sit right with anyone. But that's the show for today. I'm sorry, it's depressing. I'm sorry, it's depressing, but that's kind of stuff that was going on at CNN over the past year or so. So they cleared out some bad people. I'm sure there's probably some. I hope there's not any more left, but if there's more, then they should be exposed. I'm thankful to Project Veritas for seeking out truth and exposing it, despite how the big social media platforms and other networks and stuff come for them. They're in a big lawsuit with New York Times. James O'Keefe's place was raided not too long ago over Biden's daughter's diary, but we can get that to another day. Please go to blacktnews.com and check out different content that I've written on the website. If you enjoy what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Please make sure that you're liking, subscribing, sharing. All my social media handles are at blacktnews on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. The only one that is different is Twitter, and that one is at trueblackt. I will see you guys tomorrow, probably to cover some of this madness that they're reporting with the January 6th Kamala Harris compared to like Pearl Harbor and September 11th. And though it was a bad day last year for sure. Pearl Harbor, September 11th, really? But we'll cover that madness tomorrow. Thank you guys for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow.